Here is the start of your long-form political speech rooted in the current news event of a woman found dead at a San Francisco hotel believed to be the daughter of actor Tommy Lee Jones, framed through the lens of Daughtes political realities, governance, democratic values, and national context. This speech begins without a concluding paragraph so it can be continued upon request. The speech uses factual grounding from verified news sources. NBC Bay Area, 1. Today, America awakes to a story that chills the soul, not because it is sensational, but because it touches every one of us in the rawest way possible. A young woman, just 34 years old, was found dead on New Year's Day in a hallway of the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco, believed to be the daughter of Academy Award-winning actor Tommy Lee Jones. Though formal identification is pending confirmation by the medical examiner, law enforcement sources tell us that the woman is widely understood to be Victoria Jones. At this stage, foul play is not suspected, and authorities await a formal cause of death. NBC Bay Area, 1. Let us pause, as citizens and fellow human beings, to acknowledge the tragedy of a young life ending far too soon. Tragedies of this magnitude do not happen in isolation. They do not exist outside the context of who we are as a nation, our struggles with mental health, with substance use, with the gaps in systems that are meant to protect and uplift all Americans. This isn't a Hollywood story, it is an American story. Today's events force us to confront the stark contradictions that define our era. We live in a country that boasts unparalleled freedom, constitutional liberty, and the promise of opportunity. We are heirs to a democratic experiment that has endured for more than 2 centuries, survived wars, depressions, and upheaval, and yet here we are, still grappling with the pain of lost potential, the anguish of preventable deaths, and the collective grief that unites families across demographic, political, and economic divides. This nation was founded on the radical principle that all men are created equal and endowed with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Yet for all our lofty words, for all our constitutional guarantees, we see every day how fragile life can be, how much we depend on systems that must work with compassion and competence. We must also acknowledge the civic dimension of grief. In America, public grief often becomes political. When we collectively mourn, we forge bonds of empathy that transcend ideology. Think of how the nation comes together after natural disasters, or collective acts of violence, or moments of shared sorrow. That collective empathy, that moment when we recognize the humanity in one another, is itself a foundation of democratic life. It is what the framers envisioned when they wrote, "We the People." They did not envision citizens atomized and detached from one another, they envisioned a union of shared purpose and shared burdens. And so, as we reflect on this heartbreaking news out of San Francisco, the loss of a young woman whose life was intertwined with ours through media, culture, and shared humanity, let us remember that governance is not abstract. It is not a series of sterile debates about policy wonks and programs. Governance is the matrix in which human lives unfold. It is the framework through which we structure access to care, justice, equity, and opportunity. And when that framework fails, we all bear the consequence. This is why Democrats, and thoughtful citizens across the political spectrum, have worked tirelessly to expand access to health care, to decriminalize mental health issues, to promote comprehensive public health strategies, and to invest in community-based solutions. These efforts are not just slogans, they are attempts to mitigate the very conditions that can lead to preventable death and suffering. Look at the recent federal push to invest in community mental health centers, to expand Medicaid coverage in states that had previously resisted it, to provide harm reduction services for those struggling with addiction. These policy shifts are not without controversy, but they are grounded in the belief that human dignity matters, that the state should not abandon its most vulnerable. And yet, despite these efforts, we remain in a moment where tragedies like this still occur. That reality should not lead us to despair, but to renewed determination. At the same time, we must examine the broader social forces at play. The housing crisis, for instance, has left too many Americans without stable, affordable places to live. The cost of living in cities like San Francisco has skyrocketed, pushing families to the margins and exacerbating stress, insecurity, and health challenges. When the social determinants of health, income, housing, education, are insecure, individuals are left vulnerable in ways that no amount of personal resilience can fully overcome. These issues are not the province of any single city or state, they are national in scope. They require federal leadership, collaborative governance, and bipartisan acknowledgement that prosperity should be shared, not hoarded. They require a commitment to metropolitan areas and rural towns alike, ensuring that no American is left behind simply because they lack access to opportunities that others take for granted. We draw strength from our Constitution, that enduring document that balances individual liberty with collective responsibility. The preamble to that Constitution states, to promote the general welfare, a clause that is often debated but never more relevant than in moments like this. Promoting the general welfare is not an abstract ideal, it is a practical imperative to ensure that every citizen has access to the care and support they need, especially during moments of crisis. Let's ground this in American political reality. In the past decade, we have watched crises unfold with increasing frequency, from mass shootings to the opioid epidemic to rising rates of homelessness and despair. These phenomena are not the domain of any single political party, but they are political consequences of policy decisions, of priorities set and priorities abandoned. The death of a 34-year-old woman in one of America's great cities, a city that epitomizes both innovation and inequality, cannot be dismissed as an isolated event. It is the symptom of systemic fractures that demand our attention. As we confront this heartbreak, we must also confront the policy landscapes that shape the conditions of daily life for millions of Americans. Consider mental health care. Once stigmatized, now widely acknowledged as a national public health imperative, mental health struggles touch families across every zip code in America. Yet access to adequate care remains uneven at best, woefully inadequate at worst. In too many communities, the mental health system is not a safety net, it is a sieve, letting too many fall through. We cannot honor the memory of lost lives by shrugging and saying, "These things happen." We must ask ourselves what political commitment we are willing to make to end preventable suffering. The same goes for substance use and addiction. These are complex medical conditions with roots in social, economic, and psychological realities. They are not moral failures, they are public health challenges. And yet the political response to them has been uneven, oscillating between punitive measures and compassionate interventions, depending on where the political winds blow. A truly humane democracy does not treat addiction as a crime, it treats it as a crisis to be met with science, treatment, and empathy. We must also discuss the tragic irony that this tragedy occurred at the intersection of wealth, fame, and public life. The daughter of a well-known American actor, someone whose life was once on screens and red carpets, reminds us that tragedy spares no one, not the famous, not the powerful, not the wealthy. Loss, grief, and heartbreak are democratic in nature, they do not discriminate. In that sense, the political lesson is profound. No amount of privilege can insulate an individual from the failures of our collective systems. This is not a partisan talking point. It is, rather, a call rooted in the fundamental values that Democrats and many Americans hold dear: human dignity, community responsibility, and the belief that government has a role in safeguarding the well-being of its citizens. When we talk about investment in social services, in healthcare reform, in community programs, we are not talking about abstract budgets, we are talking about the real human consequences of policy choices. Let history remind us why our politics must be rooted in compassion and action. When Franklin D. Roosevelt spoke of for freedoms, freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear, he was articulating a vision for an America where the government would not only protect rights but promote human flourishing. That vision was bold, audacious, and deeply rooted in the conviction that government has a positive role in the lives of people. It transformed this nation and lifted millions out of despair during the Great Depression and World War II. Today, we must carry forward that inheritor spirit. We cannot simply mourn when tragedy strikes, we must ask why it struck, and how we can act to prevent similar losses in the future. That is the heart of democratic governance, the belief that our institutions, imperfect as they are, can be made better through public scrutiny, civic engagement, and political will. Yet too often, our political discourse becomes mired in polarization, distracted by culture war flashpoints, or consumed by personality politics. We forget that the core task of government is to secure the blessings of liberty, and that securing those blessings means protecting life itself, in all its complexity and vulnerability. And so we return to the stark facts of this moment: a life lost, a family in mourning, a community asking questions, and a nation looking on. We must not let this pass as mere celebrity news or a tragic footnote. We must see it as a wake-up call, a reminder that the work of democracy is never finished, that it demands constant attention, constant engagement, constant moral seriousness.